Good morning, scholars. At this point in the story, as we review chapter 14, we have reached a very somber point, and it's because we're discussing the topic of death. We have all grown to love and cherish and appreciate Aslan as the protagonist or the good guy in this novel. Aslan would definitely be the person least deserving of torture and killing. But as we read in chapter 14, Aslan was tortured, he was humiliated, and then his head was cut off. Very graphic, very difficult to read, but there's a reason that C.S. Lewis portrayed that, and there's somewhere he's going with it. And as we said, this is an allegory, and it's a point that he's making. It's symbolic of some other things, which we will see later. Today, we're going to talk about some of the symbolism in what is occurring with Aslan. And as we said previously, this book is an allegory, which means it contains a lot of symbolism, and its ultimate goal is to make a religious or political point. In this point, he is using symbolism to tell the story of Christ. And if you have read scripture a little bit, you probably have read the account of Christ being crucified. It was recently Good Friday, and that's the day set aside to honor that. So today we're going to look at some of the symbolism that comes with chapter 14, and I think it will start to make a lot more sense to you. The account of Aslan's murder is pretty horrific. It may have even been very difficult for some of you to read, but I want us to look at a few highlights just to make the point of what C.S. Lewis is trying to show us. We read that Aslan turned himself in to the White Witch, and then we read this shortly thereafter. "Bind him, I say," repeated the White Witch. The hags made a dart at him and shrieked with triumph when they found that he had made no resistance at all. Then others, evil dwarfs and apes, rushed in to help them, and between them they rolled the huge lion over on his back and tied all four paws together, shouting and cheering. Just a little bit later, we read this. "Stop," said the witch. "Let him first be shaved." Another roar of mean laughter went up from her followers as an ogre with a pair of shears came forward and squatted down by Aslan's head. Snip, snip, snip went the shears, and masses of curling gold began to fall to the ground. "Why, he's only a great cat after all," cried one. "Is that what we were afraid of?" said another. And they surged around Aslan, jeering at him, saying things like, "Puss, puss, poor pussy," and "How many mice have you caught today, cat?" and "Would you like a saucer of milk, pussums?" At last, the rabble had had enough of this. They began to drag the bound and muzzled lion to the stone table, some pulling and some pushing. He was so huge that even when they got him there, it took all their efforts to hoist him on to the surface of it. Then there was more tying and tightening of cords. Then she, the White Witch, began to whet her knife. It looked to the children, when the gleam of the torchlight fell on it, as if the knife were made of stone, not of steel, and it was of a strange and evil shape. At last she drew near. She stood by Aslan's head. The children did not see the actual moment of the killing. They couldn't bear to look and had covered their eyes. We have been learning that allegory is a type of story in which ideas and principles are described in terms of characters, figures, and events. An allegory has a purpose of teaching a moral lesson. The characters and events stand for other things. They are symbols. In this particular allegory, C.S. Lewis is telling us the story of the crucifixion of Jesus, using Aslan as a symbol for Jesus. The events that he describes in Aslan's killing are very similar to the events that you can read about in the Bible about Jesus' crucifixion. Many Bible scholars believe that Jesus' crucifixion was actually foretold by the prophet Isaiah about 700 years before it happened. Here is a verse from Isaiah chapter 53, verse 5 in the Bible. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. Even though that's being stated in the past tense, prophets often spoke that way to prophesy the future. And so many scholars believe that Isaiah was telling in advance the type of death that Jesus would endure. The actual crucifixion of Jesus is described in 4 different books in the Bible, and those are the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Today, you are going to read the version found in the book of Matthew. Let me remind you once again, you are reading this from a literary perspective. We're looking at this as history and as literature, and our main purpose in reading this is to see the mindset that C.S. Lewis had as he wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So when this video concludes, I want you to click the link below it, and it will open a PDF of a passage from Matthew in the Bible. As you read Matthew's account of Jesus' crucifixion, think about the similarities between the event Matthew is describing and the event that C.S. Lewis is describing. When you have finished reading the passage from Matthew, answer this challenge question. List 3 ways that C.S. Lewis' description of Aslan's murder is similar to Matthew's description of Jesus' crucifixion. Use a proper and complete sentence for each reason, and email your responses to gekelley@jmcss.org for the shout out. I'm getting a lot of good responses from you. I enjoy reading them, and I'm really looking forward to getting your feedback on this one. Have a great day, scholars, and I will see you tomorrow.